Hey friends, let's talk about men in counseling. Listen in.
You are listening to Head Shrink Inc., your answers to life, relationships, and daily living.
Hey friends, it's Doc David. You haven't heard from me in a while, and I took a hiatus, and so I'm hopefully back. Yes, thank you. Appreciate it. Yes, thank you. Okay, you can stop now. No, seriously, please stop. Stop, seriously. Okay. All right, thank you. So, that's a special effect I had. Pretty fancy. So, I took a little bit of a hiatus and have been inundated with lots of different things, and my creative bug got at me again. I thought I want to start podcasting again. So here I am podcasting. I am going to change my podcasting up a little bit. I think what I really enjoy doing is being able to interview / talk to people. And so I'm going to incorporate that into this podcast a little bit more. And that will be talking to all types of different people, nothing specifically, probably some therapists, maybe some musicians, actors, authors. I mean, anyone and anything. So if you have anybody that you think, David, you've got to try to talk to this person, that actually would respond back to me, feel free to send them my way. You can drop me an email at headshrinkinc. That's INC, headshrinkinc@gmail.com. Because when I think about passions and things like that, my passion in regards to like podcasting is definitely talking to people. And prior to this podcast, I would get with a buddy and we would have people, actors call us and we would interview them, and it was just fun. So I want to try to get back to that. So what I do want to talk about today, though, excuse me, is men and counseling. Inevitably in my practice, I will have people call up for counseling, and it's not usually the man who calls up. The man usually will call up if there is, if they're forced to. And when I say forced, I mean they have a partner that's saying, if you don't call, I'm going to divorce you, right? That's kind of forcing. Or they have a child that has run away. They have a child that is did some domestic violence, like hit him, broke something in the home. And so they're at like this desperate place. On the other hand, women tend to not call out of desperation. They tend to call because they just can't seem to get past something, and so they want help getting it fixed. So there's a difference a lot of times in why men and women call. So one of the things that I've done is I wrote this blog to talk about why men don't enjoy counseling. Now, this is kind of my experience. There's going to be all numbers of reasons that men don't enjoy counseling, but I've gotten a couple specific things that I think relate to men not really enjoying counseling. When I was going through my therapy training, one of the things that was required of us is that as therapists, we go to a therapist ourselves to kind of get the experience and see what it was like. And honestly, I did not enjoy it. And that was probably like 20 years ago. Since then, I think I've matured a little bit. I would hope so. And one of the things that I find really important in life is to be authentic with people. And so a counseling session is a place where hopefully you can be authentic with a person. But my goal in life is try to be authentic just in real life with people. And sometimes people are really uncomfortable with that. So let's dig into why men typically don't like counseling. So one of the first things that comes up to mind for me is that men really don't like to feel vulnerable. I think in our society, this false belief has been created that men just need to be tough. And so I don't think it's any accident that men tend to dominate a field in which there's stereotypical toughness, right? Like army, law enforcement, firefighter. Now, that's not to say that women can't be in those professions, but I think there's this toughness thing that physical labor, and not physical labor, like just this hard thing about those professions that don't lend itself towards the feminine, the feminine type. So I think men tend to dominate those fields, and there's a toughness in those fields. And I think as little boys, parents teach little boys, be tough, don't cry, suck it up, pull yourself up by your bootstraps. And so these messages, I think, as a man gets older, morph into this belief that being vulnerable is a bad thing, or saying sorry is a sign of weakness, and you definitely don't want to show weakness. And so coming to a counselor and talking about these things that are hard to get through is hard for somebody, and it could be men or women, but it's typically men. It's hard for somebody that doesn't like to be vulnerable, and coming to a counseling session is potentially a place where you're going to have to be vulnerable. Another thing is that counseling for some feels like failure, like, oh, I haven't been able to figure this thing out, and so I guess I'll go to a counselor. One of the things I often hear from teenagers about their dads, or from partners about their husband or boyfriend, is that they don't believe in counseling. And I always kind of think it's funny. It's like people say, I don't believe in Santa. Well, whether or not you believe in it, it's still something that is around, right? And so St. Nicholas was a real person. Counseling is a real thing. And so when you say you don't believe in it, I guess I would like your words to be a little bit more precise. So men like to accomplish things typically, and they like to be recognized for things that they've done well. I like to be recognized for things that I've done well. And so it's hard to acknowledge that when you haven't done something well, you need to go to a third party to help you figure that out. So marriage, for example, it's hard work, and not being able to do it well can be devastating, but it's something that you're not necessarily trained in how to do well. And so going to counseling, well, for some it may feel like a failure. I view it more as it's an opportunity to get some tools to help you live a better life. A third reason that men don't like counseling is because they're forced by their partners. And this is where a majority of guys that I interact or I get phone calls from, this is where a majority of those guys that shows up, is like they've been caught cheating, they've been caught looking at porn, they have an anger issue, and so they're given an ultimatum. If you don't do X, which is, go to a counselor or call a counselor or find a counselor, I'm going to leave you. And so feeling controlled by someone does not feel great. Feeling controlled by someone who says they love you is even worse. And so when I interact with couples, I say, you know what, don't threaten, just give information. Because if you just give information, that's much less intimidating and intense. And so when a spouse forces their partner into counseling by blackmail, leverage, or another type of force, it doesn't usually go very well. So another reason that men typically don't like counseling, and I would say this is more not just men, this is people in general that don't like change. When you come to counseling, the idea is that you're going because there's going to be some type of change, or you're pursuing some type of change. And a lot of times I run into the client who will say, well, I went to this counselor and nothing was different. And you can be with the most amazing client or counselor in the world, but if you're against any type of change, every session you have is going to be miserable, because the goal of most therapists is to help you change for the better. And so knowing you need to do something different and then actually doing it is a real challenge. And over, a man may try to change and they may be successful at times, but they end up back in the same place. And so that's why a job like mine exists, to help a person get over that or figure out a more effective way to make that change, to internalize that change so it becomes a part of life or even second nature. Some men, and a lot of these can just be generally people, but I'm talking specifically about men that I've interacted with. Another reason men don't like to go to counseling is because they believe they have to be in control. And so going to counseling challenges that idea of control. It's giving someone else, the counselor, therapist, psychologist, or what have you, a little bit of control in your life. And if your wife or significant other is there, it's even more difficult, because then there's a person in your life that's going to potentially hold you accountable when you leave the counselor's office. And so this idea about control, if that's a reason that you're not going to counseling, I mean, you need to go and address that, because maybe that control thing is the very thing that's leading you from actually changing stuff in your life into a positive manner or in a positive way. And so ultimately, these are like some ideas that I've come up with that I've seen as challenging for men in counseling. And so if you are a therapist, those are things to address when you are interacting with men who seem reluctant. And depending on your style, I mean, you can address it directly or you can address it indirectly. And so for partners and for men that are hearing this, it's like those are legit things that you need to address in your life. If you're really stuck at a place where you're just not moving forward and your relationship is hurting, turn an eye on yourself. Don't just view it as your partner is the one with the issue. Turn an eye on yourself and think, okay, maybe there's something that I could change about myself. I'm thinking of a son who has a dad who just absolutely badmouths counseling and the idea of getting help. And it's unfortunate because this dad has several bad decisions that he's made in his life, and his son, who's a teenager, thinks his dad is great and is heading down that same path. And I feel bad for them, because I think that they could manage so many more better things in their life if they just sat down and gave talking to somebody a chance. But sometimes people can't do that. And I think a lot of times they're scared. They're scared of the unknown, scared of what's going to be required of them. And so what I would ask of you is, if you're a man and your partner wants you to go to counseling, please consider it, because your partner cares about you enough to want to try to work things out with you. Because if you don't work things out, then relationships break up, kids get hurt, et cetera, and that's never usually a good thing. So, hey, thanks for listening in. Hopefully I will be a little bit more consistent. I will attempt to be a little bit more consistent in this podcasting thing. Life gets in the way at times, and when you're not getting paid, then it's harder to do things at times. You probably understand that. You can contact me at headshrinkinc@gmail.com, or go on to Facebook, Doc David, and I have a Facebook. I'd love a like, or go on to Instagram, Dr. David Simonson. Thanks. We'll talk to you soon.